when I bought properties, I really looked for properties that I can make 5 or 6 bedrooms. Because if you can do 5 bedrooms, that's like $3,100 a month. If you can do 6 bedrooms, that's usually at least $3,600 to $3,800 a month. And then my largest one now has about technically 11 bedrooms, but we fill 9 of them.
Welcome to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owners Association, where real estate investors have found success since 1968. I'm your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group. This episode is sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com. And RCB Associates, helping real estate investors and small business owners navigate the complex world of health insurance and Medicare benefits at rcbassociatesllc.com. Hello and welcome to episode 435. My guest today became a millionaire at the age of 28 by cracking the code on student housing. Ryan Chaw figured out how to double and triple his rental income with his co-living and student housing investment model while working a full-time job. Now, after acquiring 15 properties, he has been able to fully replace his pharmacist salary with his rental cash flow. Ryan, welcome to the show.
How's it going, Brian? Glad to be on the show, and thanks for the invite.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started investing in real estate.
I graduated as a pharmacist in 2016, and I wanted to find a way to create financial freedom for myself. I saw that my grandpa invested in a couple rentals back in the San Francisco Bay Area back in the 50s. And as we all know, those prices skyrocketed, rents went up like crazy. And he was able to not only retire early, but help also cover part of my college tuition and that of my brothers as well. So I wanted to get started as soon as possible. I worked a lot of overtime. I was working a full-time job, and I basically built up this rental portfolio on the side, bought 1 property per year in California, and was able to cash flow very well in California by renting out by the room to basically, like you said, double or even triple the rental income on the property. And now I have 15 properties, some in California, some in out of state like Ohio and Alabama. And yeah, I'm retired at 31 from my pharmacist job.
Tell us what that was like to be able to retire. Like, how did you know that you were able to retire, and what did that feel like once you did?
Basically, after taxes, a pharmacist will make around $12K per month or so, $10 to $12K per month. And I figured, hey, if I replace that amount, if I make $10 to $12K per month in net cash flow, then that's the point where I will decide to retire. And so I set this date, basically August of 2023. I said, pretty much that's the date once I did all the calculations, right? And so that date hit, and I'm like, okay, I'm retired. Had my retirement party and everything, and that was it.
Do you have any fear about doing that? I mean, because, in real estate, you can have some amazing, crazy CapEx expenses. Maybe you have to replace a roof. Maybe you got a boiler that goes out. Those are things you don't have to contend with when you have a W-2 job. What was that emotion like that dealing with? Did you have those fears, and how did you overcome them?
So I knew I would potentially go through an identity thing because I worked as a pharmacist for 7.5 to about 8 years. So I knew that changing from an identity to a pharmacist to become a full-time real estate investor, it might be a little bit of a shock to my identity. So I kind of planned beforehand what my day would look like. So basically, I wake up in the morning, this is the job I'll probably be doing, or this is the job I want to do. And then any jobs that I did not want to do, I hired out to my team. So at that time, we kind of already started hiring on people like bookkeepers. We have contractors and handymen that are kind of basically on call to fix issues around the house whenever they come up. And I also have executive assistants now. So basically, I just planned it from the beginning. I also have this business mentor that I hired, and she kind of went through the process of what it's like to be an entrepreneur after you quit your day job.
So let's get back to the student housing. I mean, take us through your first property and kind of what that process was like, and how you actually managed that property and turned it into something that cash flowed.
So I had a lot of problems on my first property. It was a 100-year-old property. So I bought it, and then 4 months after I bought it, I had a tenant call saying, "Hey, dude, there's sewage coming out of the kitchen sink. It's all over the kitchen floor. It's backed up into the bathrooms. Of course, it smells like sewage." So, it's kind of a very negative experience at the very beginning of my journey. And so I had to call up a sanitation crew. I had to scope the line, snake the line, and it turned out that the whole line was broken. We had to replace it. It was about $9,000 to do that. I also had to replace the HVAC because it wasn't really working. It was an old HVAC unit that cost about $15,000. So I spent almost $30,000, a little bit over $30,000 on just miscellaneous repairs on that property after the first year alone. And I was like, oh man, this really sucks, right? But what was great is I kept at it, and I just doubled down and working overtime and working two jobs. And I was able to also get a loan from my father because at the time I didn't have enough cash to pay for all the repairs. And then basically what we did is we put in an extra bedroom. And he I think it was like $1,500 or $2,500 just to put in that extra bedroom. And I gave him that rent from that extra bedroom for the rest of his life. So he gets $550 per month for the rest of his life for a loan of, I think it was like $20,000, which is I think it's like 30-something% return per year. So it was a great deal for me, great deal for him, because, I created that extra bedroom out of the living room. And so the first one made about $2,500 in rental income because I rented out about 4 bedrooms. And then from there, I kind of started, when I bought properties, I really looked for properties that I can make 5 or 6 bedrooms. Because if you can do 5 bedrooms, that's like $3,100 a month. If you can do 6 bedrooms, that's usually at least $3,600 to $3,800 a month. And then my largest one now it has technically 11 bedrooms, but we fill 9 of them.
With that first house, did you buy it as a traditional rental, or did you go in knowing you were going to do renting by the bedroom?
So I actually had a friend who was doing this in college. He was basically living for free because his aunt purchased a house for him and he lived in it and then rented out to his college friends. I was like, oh, why don't I do this as well? Because it seems to make a lot more money compared to doing the traditional single family home, rent out as an entire house. And basically that's what inspired me to get into it. And I invested near my alma mater college where I went to pharmacy school. So a lot of the students I bring in, pretty much, 80% of them are either pharmacy, dentistry, like pre-med students, nursing, PT. So I really focus on a lot of the grad students because what's interesting is that most of these campuses don't provide housing for grad students. They only provide for undergrad. So there's usually a good 3,000 students or so who just don't have any housing. They have to live off campus. And grad students tend to be some of the best tenants as well because they've gone through their college. They're really now focused on getting their doctorate degree or their, more advanced degree, and they're not there to throw a wild party or something like that. So as long as I have 1 or 2 of those grad students at the house, they basically keep the house a quiet study environment.
And how much more are you making by renting by the bedroom than you would be if you were renting out the whole house?
Typically, where I invest in Stockton, California, the rent will be around $1,500 to $1,800 as the usual rent if you rented out the whole house. But because I rent by the bedroom and I rent to like 5 people and I charge $600 per room, $600 to $700 per room, it's more like $3,100, $3,200 in that area. I've even purchased out of state where the houses were like the first one I bought was $210,000. So the mortgage was $1,190 per month. And then I rented out 6 bedrooms at that one. And I was making $3,750 per month in rental income. So the spread was about $2,500 a month on a house that was about $210,000.
So are all of your properties this way? Are they all rented out by the bedroom?
Yeah, all 15.
What's it like leasing? Because that's a lot. You're kind of exponentially increasing the number of leases that you have to sign and residents that you have to talk with. So how does that work out for you?
A lot of times what's cool is that this method is really great for people who want to live together with their friends at a house. So a lot of times I'll get contacted by one person. He's like, I have 4 other friends who want to just live together and we want a house because apartments, they only have like 2 or 3 or 4 bedrooms maybe, right? And we really want a private house. We want to have many rooms so that we can all live together. So a lot of times I'll get one person who contacts me and the whole house is filled. And they're basically the lead tenant. They help set things up for me as well. And so a lot of these houses, I have a lead tenant. If not, though, I will get individual applicants and I'll try to pair them up together based off of like their major, if they're kind of in the same classes. So basically you have like a mentor-mentee relationship where you have your, I guess seniors teaching their juniors like, hey, this is what to expect in the classes for next year or this year or whatever. So that creates a really good dynamic for people.
Do the people who live in the house, they know each other already, or are you placing people there who might be strangers?
A little bit of both. I would say 50-50. 50% of the time, I'll just have somebody who just has a bunch of friends and then they just take the whole house. And then again, I might place people individually if they're contacting me individually.
And what kind of challenges do you run into with this model as opposed to like just renting out the whole house without renting out room by room?
I think a lot of people are worried that you would get like party tenants. And the very first year I did have a party tenant, but it was kind of my fault because he was in the same fraternity as me. And I knew he was kind of a little bit wild, right? Pretty loud and everything. So one time one of the other tenants contacted me saying, hey, he invited over like 80 people for this wild house party, right? And I was like, oh my God, this is horrible. And then, I had cops called and things like that. So if you choose the wrong tenant, obviously something like that could happen. But ever since that year, I kind of learned my lesson to really vet the tenant, see how responsible they are, just based off of talking with them. I also try to screen social media to see if they're a party type of tenant. And ever since then, I really focused on more like graduate students, people who are more serious about their studies. And a lot of times we even get, if we're near medical centers, I'll get like residents and fellows. So people who are staying for like 2 or 3 years to do their hospital internships, essentially.
Is there any difference between managing these properties from locally, because in your area of California, versus the ones that you're owning and managing out of state?
I would say the most important thing is you have to have a team and people that you can trust that are going to be the boots on the ground if you do out of state investing. That's the biggest change I had to make. I also needed to have, I've hired on some executive assistants, and they kind of really help with a lot of the legal work. Like they help coordinate with our lawyers to get the legalities all taken care of. They also help they created this ticketing system. So I basically put in a ticket, or sorry, the tenants will put in a ticket or I put in a ticket, and then the contractor sees that ticket and then he'll go in there, fix up the place. He uses the spare key and then he sends us the invoice and then resolves the ticket. So there's like systems and teams that you really want to put in place in order to make sure that you're very successful doing this out of state. With that being said, like nowadays, the amount of time I spend on the actual rentals is a lot less because I have that team behind me, right? I would say it's less than part-time.
How much time do you actually spend on your business?
I would say nowadays, because I'm constantly expanding, so I have to do like the walkthroughs and everything like that. I would say about 10 hours a week or something like that. Yeah, but most of the time, like I'll spend like creating those systems and acquiring new properties.
So you're still doing the walkthroughs, showing to potential residents?
Oh, no, not like that. No, I mean, like when I'm acquiring a new property, I have to contact the realtor and then we do a walkthrough. So I decide if I want to put an offer or not.
So you're more active on the acquisition side as opposed to the actual management side.
Yeah, exactly. So my current tenants do the walkthroughs. So the first person that comes in, he basically does the walkthroughs for everyone else who comes in. If not, I also have my handyman or general contractor, and they can kind of go in there and do a quick walkthrough.
Talk about the acquisition side. I mean, if you're expanding, how are you managing to do that?
It's really important you buy very close to the school. There's a couple of things that students care about, right? Number one is being very close to the school. So they care about convenience. So if you're within like a 5 to 7 minute walking distance, that's like an A+ for them. If you're like within a 5-minute driving distance, that's more of like a B for them, B+. So I try to be as close to the school as possible. And I also do research into what areas students really are drawn towards. Like they'll say like, oh yeah, I want to live in Little Italy or, Shaker Heights or something like that, right? And so I'll do the research, look on student forums and things like that to find that information. The second thing students care about is safety. So you really need to make sure that the student feels safe and secure, especially the parent. If the parent goes to visit the house and they see a lot of trash around, or they see, I don't know, people with bandanas and colors or whatever, then they might be less drawn towards that. Or if they see like homeless people walking around, for example. And then the third thing would be affordability. So a lot of times we're a lot more affordable compared to people who are staying on campus. Like on campus usually charges like $1,200 a month or so, versus we're only charging like $600 to $700 per month. So it's like half the price for them. And it makes a lot of sense.
I'd like to take a moment to tell you about Green Property Management. Not only do they manage everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area, they also manage my entire portfolio. So I can tell you from personal experience that their unique flat fee management style is worth a closer look. If you feel that your property isn't operating to its fullest potential, then Green Property Management can help you take a holistic approach that will save you money, eliminate your headaches, and increase your net income. And if you're a property manager interested in applying Green Property Management's model, give them a call at 1-866-95-GREEN or visit them on the web at greenpropertymgt.com. If you're thinking of leaving your W-2 job and becoming a full-time real estate investor, one of the greatest costs you must consider is healthcare for you and your family. When I made this transition myself, I found the whole healthcare insurance process to be confusing and frustrating. That's why I'm glad I met Chad Creasy at RCB Associates. Chad is a professional health insurance agent who helps real estate investors and small business owners understand and choose their best healthcare options. And best of all, his services are covered by the insurance company and won't cost you a dime. If you live in Michigan and are expecting a change in your healthcare insurance coverage for any reason, or losing employer coverage or transitioning into Medicare, then you owe it to yourself to contact Chad Creasy at rcbassociatesllc.com. What are you focusing on now? I mean, you're building your acquisitions. Have you changed your model at all? Are you improving on it? Or was it working pretty well and you're just doing more of the same?
Just doing more of the same. I'm a big fan of, if you have a really strong model, just continue to copy it. You don't have to keep reinventing the wheel. Obviously, it's always a good idea to be nimble in case something like COVID-19 happens, right? But with that being said, yeah, I just copied the same thing for my second, third, fourth house. So it's really all about doing that first property well, and then just improving every time you buy a property, because once you get down the model, it becomes so much easier. And that's how I was able to, at first I was buying only one a year. Then it was more like, 3 or 4 potentially per year.
What could you be doing better?
I think leadership skills is really big. I've been really trying to focus on that. Just because, I get emails, there's little things that come up. I think I'm trying to get really better at like my response times to everything. I'm trying to get really good at also asking for feedback from my team for how to improve things, because that's a big thing when you're really more of a manager of this project, or you're working on your business rather than in your business. You also want to empower others to be able to solve problems themselves, so that you're not the only one solving all of the problems, right? So a lot of times, yeah, that's one of the biggest things I've been trying to do is ask. And whenever we have meetings or company meetings, I always ask for feedback from them to see what ideas they have.
Give us an example of some problems you had that might have led you to think, okay, I really need to focus on that skill.
A lot of the problems could be like with bookkeeping, right? Because we have so many different rentals and we have a lot of tenants. Like, let's say there's a payment that like we didn't see the person make the payment, right? Well, that could be due to a couple reasons. One could be like their parents sent it, so it's under a different name, or maybe a friend or relative sent it on their behalf. Maybe it was sent through a payment app like Venmo or something like that, and they didn't put in the description that it was the rent for that one person. Maybe they paid it really early, like they paid like 3 months in advance. They paid, let's say, May rent in February. Well, that kind of messes up the tracking as well, because now you have to go back to February to see May or whatever. So there's little things like that where I ask my bookkeepers, okay, we have this problem. how do you think we can solve this? How do you think we can capture it? And we've been able to kind of put certain rules into QuickBooks to be able to capture those issues.
What kind of properties do you look for? I mean, you're buying a very certain type of rental property. How do you know when you're in the acquisition phase if it's a property that's going to suit your purposes?
What I mentioned earlier is very important, right? Being close to the school, so convenience, having security. So I set up a Ring camera and I have to be in a pretty good neighborhood that people feel comfortable staying in. And then the third one is obviously affordability. So those three things are very important. But I also look for houses that have a high square footage. So I use this rule, I call it the rule of 300. If you divide by the square footage, the total square footage of the house by 300, then that gives you how many bedrooms you can have at the house. So if you have a 1,500 square foot house, divide that by 300, that gives you 5 bedrooms. 1,800 square foot, divide that by 300, gets you 6 bedrooms. So I really try to aim for bedroom or houses that are like 1,800 square foot or more, so I can get the 6 bedrooms in there. And so I have kind of maximized the cash flow on the single family home, essentially.
Are you carving it up then and adding more bedrooms once you buy it?
Yeah. What's interesting is students don't really care about having a huge amount of common space. A lot of times, like if you just look at it nowadays, most students stay in the room where they hang out in their bedrooms rather than in the common space. With that being said, I might convert like the garage to kind of a nice like pool table, foosball table or whatever there, but it's not 100% necessary. So a lot of times I'll take like, if the house has a living room, a family room, and a dining room, I would just turn like the living room and family room into bedrooms, and then the dining room will be left over as the common space. And so some of these houses I have definitely more minimal common space, but the bedrooms are pretty large.
And if any of our listeners want to kind of get started doing what you're doing, how would you advise them to get started?
I think it's really important to invest near top colleges. So I go to US News top colleges list and I kind of just go through those colleges and see what the home prices are around that area. Because if the home prices are too high, it's going to be a little bit harder for the model to work at these higher interest rates. But that's where I usually start, is always the top colleges, because these are, if you're getting into these top colleges, you probably have like a 4.0 GPA, you're very well rounded, you're very serious about your studies, right? Versus like being an undeclared major and not really sure where you're going to be going. These people are very like, okay, I want to be a doctor, or I have aspirations to be a lawyer or whatever, something like that, right? So I think that's really important, is to kind of vet what type of programs these colleges also have available. But yeah, that's kind of where I would start.
Is there anything about your strategy or your model that I haven't asked you that I should ask you?
I guess like how many people can you get at a house is a good question. So a lot of times I find that 6 people at a house is a really good sweet spot. However, I've been able to have houses that have maybe up to 9 people. And that's only usually if you find like a fraternity or like a swim team or something like that. So a lot of times I will like outreach to the college's coaches, so like the swim team, tennis team, etc. And they might have a lot of people who want to live together, or the swim team that wants to live together at a house. And so they will be able to place more than 6 people potentially at one property. So that's something to keep in mind. But I find that 6 people is a really good sweet spot.
Is less a problem, or does that just mean more money or less money for you?
Not too much of a problem. It just depends on what the rent rates are in the area. Like I said, usually you charge 600 to 700, but if you invest in like San Jose, for instance, a room there goes for $1,200 a month. So it just really depends on that. So you do have to do the calculations there. But yes, if you can get to like 6, that does ensure that you have usually at least 1,800 a month in cash flow.
Ryan, how would someone find out more about you or get a hold of you?
You can get a hold of me through www.newbierealestateeinvesting.com/guide. I provide a free PDF that kind of goes through my method, some of the strategies I use specifically, as well as mistakes that I made and what I learned from them, what I do differently now. And you can get that at www.newbierealestateeinvesting.com/guide. And newbie is spelled NEWBIE. And you can also contact me through there. I will respond to all your emails.
What is your favorite hack or app?
I like Zillow a lot. I open up that app every day to look for properties that hit the market. And I usually put an offer the next day, but the same day or the next day. So yeah, I'm on there all the time.
So Zillow is your main guide when you're in acquisition mode, huh?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the properties, I would say at least 90%, 80% of the properties I bought that on the market, on the MLS or on Zillow. For sure. There's deals all the time with this method. A lot of people think that there's no deals out there right now with the high interest rates. But if you're using this method and you're targeting these houses with like higher square footage, for example, a lot of people they're not really drawn to that because they don't have a family that's like, I don't know, 8 people or something like that. So one of the houses we bought, we got at an $83,000 discount. That was the 11-bedroom one I was talking about because nobody really wanted to pay extra for those extra bedrooms. But for us, for me, it was like perfect.
Then before we go, like give us an example or tell us about your most slam dunk success that you've had so far to date.
I'll just take the first one I bought out of state. That was really good. Just it's not like the best one, but it's pretty reasonable. Most people should be able to get something like this. I bought this $210,000 property. It was a 4-bed, 2.5 bathroom when I bought it. And then I took the living room and divided it up into 3 rooms. So 2 of the rooms became bedrooms and the third room became what was left of the living room, I guess, which is the new common area. So the house ended up having 6 bedrooms, and I charged anywhere from like $590 to the loft was $750. So total, I was charging about $37.50 in rental income, and the mortgage was $1190. And I think it was just a few months after, like a month or 2 months after, after I bought it, I had this group of 6 people, 6 guys, sign a 2-year lease on that from basically August to August in 2 years, right? So I was making $2,500 a month on a property. It was a $43,000 down payment.
Well, Ryan, thanks for sharing your stories with us today and helping us learn about student housing and how you're doing it by, adding as many rooms as possible, renting out by the room, and sharing some specific examples with us. Thank you so much for having this conversation with us today.
Thank you for inviting me on the podcast, Brian.
I want to thank everybody for listening to this episode. I'm your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group, and you can find out more about me by going to higinvestor.com. That's HIGinvestor.com.